Welcome back. Student debt poses a great danger to the country's economy and the higher education sector, more so under the current economic climate of high cost of living. And with the expectation from students to pay back the debt after getting employment, this further entangles more South Africans into the spiraling circle of debt. But to help us unpack this conversation further, we're now joined by Paulvia Shiburi, a student debt advisor and PS Debt Management CEO. Paulvia, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. It's such a great pleasure to be here.
Sure. We're talking student debt, obviously a conversation that many people shy away from, especially during the month of January. Luckily, we're in Feb, but many students are looking to get into tertiaries this time of the year. 40% of those who are looking to further their studies are part of the missing middle. So it's those students who don't necessarily qualify for an NSFAS and who don't afford or can't pay for their fees on their own. How dire is the situation with student debt in South Africa?
You know, one thing that we know about education is that it's the key to a greater future. However, we can see that in South Africa it does come with a steep price tag to pay. You know, currently we are sitting at 16.5 billion that is owed by students to several or various universities. And that's only because of, you know, the only way to realize your dream now these days, it's through debt, you know, obtaining a student loan so that you can pay for your studies and further your studies. And a lot of people are still over-indebted because of that. And it keeps rising because now a lot of students who are then graduate, you know, don't have employment, you know. Getting that degree or that diploma doesn't necessarily guarantee your employment, which means that now the debt will remain unpaid.
And it does become a vicious circle because, I mean, you are speaking of tertiary students who've graduated in the hope that when they get employment, they'll be able to pay back that job. And the stats say that less than 10% of the country's unemployed are those that often do get jobs. So when you look at it as a potential student who's looking to get into university, you say, oh, but I'll fall part of that less than 10%. And then you find yourself in a situation where you do have the degree, but then you don't have the job, and you find yourself, or the parent who's taken out the loan, now having to sit with a bigger debt. What are some of the other factors that contribute to this vicious cycle?
You know, there are quite a number of things that contribute to this. Let's look at the economy, for example, right now. You know, the high or the increasing cost in you know, the standard of living has really gone up so high that parents are not in a position where they can afford to make or plan or take out any educational plans, you know, to cover their children so that they are able to go to school. But we find that a lot of them are not able to do that, primarily because of the state of the economy right now. And you know, as you already know, that interest rates have gone up quite a number of times. And since COVID, we have literally, inflation has been at its worst. And so right now, a lot of people find themselves in a lot of debt that they are unable to pay. And immediately, or when they get employment, now you have to start again from scratch and pay back the debt that you were owing, and before you can actually start to live a normal life.
Let's talk about this debt. This debt often is put out by commercial banks, I believe, where parents would go and find a loan in the hopes of paying off the interest during the time, and when your child graduates, they would then start paying off that capital amount. What other forms of debt are we finding ourselves in, especially when it comes to students and their parents? Because I can imagine that in such a situation, then the household is strained even more.
That's correct. A lot of households are strained because, more especially if, you know, we always say that student debt is one of the good debts that one can get, you know. But now, when we think about it, if you're unable to, if you're unemployed, you then start to question yourself, was that a good debt that I've taken before? Because it was in the hope of bettering, you know, ourselves and bettering, you know, that we become better and, you know, in school, in all that we do. But we also find that a lot of people just don't take out student loans alone. Remember that student loan is used only for tuition fees. You might find that there are further personal loans that are taken by parents to accommodate, to pay for accommodation. If books are not covered, there are a whole lot of things that may not be included within that, the student loan that they might have taken. So it means that parents are further getting into debts and looking at, you're taking a child to school, you need to find accommodation for them. A whole lot of things are involved, and most of the parents just take out multiple debts on top of the current student loan that they've taken. They take out personal loans to make sure that they, give their children the lifestyle that they want them to have.
And what sort of social ills do we then find these students, especially those that come from rural areas, who come to the cities to find spaces in these universities, who wouldn't necessarily have families to stay with? So, like you say, it's that accommodation that comes at an extra cost. Where do we then find other pockets of society where these children find themselves in trying to make up for that money of accommodation or for food that further deteriorates their lives?
One of the things that we have picked up is that, as a debt counselor, you get a number of people that come through, parents that need help. And then we also pick up that there's quite a number of students that also, if they have some sort of, parents would send some sort of allowance on a monthly basis. Students now actually also start to obtain debt themselves with the hope that they want to, for an example, they just want to, assist in paying for some of their stuff, and they further take out maybe a credit card with that income that they'll be receiving, or that allowance that they get from their parents, and now they also further get into debts. Now you found that in one household, the parents are over indebted because of the student loans and multiple loans taken, and then the student at the same time has also taken a few loans here and there, whether it's cash loans, micro lenders, whatever it may be. So now it comes that the entire household is over indebted.
So how important is financial literacy and education then in instances such as this?
Financial literacy is very important, and I often say that I don't believe that there's much that's been done. There's not a lot of talks right now with regards to financial literacy. I mean, these are the things that we learn. Most of the people learn just after graduating, and then they get to where they start to learn about money, start to have a relationship with money. Whereas I believe that if subjects like money, if I introduced at an earlier stage. I remember at one point Oxford said that, it's important that kids from as little as 5 years start to teach themselves about money, or start to learn about money, because then they become familiar with, money and the relationship that they should have with money. By the time they're 18, they know a whole lot more. And some of us, unfortunately, we learn at a very late stage, When you start to work, that's when you start to, start to have a relationship with money. And I think by that time, we do a lot of wrong choices or wrong decisions, and then we later now, to rectify those decisions that we have taken, it takes a little bit of time. It also does take you a few steps back, because now you need to recover. You need to be in a position where you are able to, get back on your feet again.
And talking about that recovery and being 10 steps back, I mean, even if you were to find a job, maybe 4 or 5 years after you've been sitting, waiting, and still trying to service this loan, what impact does it have in you trying to now buy a house, buy a car, and in all the other things that you would need credit for in other parts of your life?
One thing about South Africa that we've gotten to realize is that in order to have credit, you must have some sort of credit. You must have some sort of credit profile or credit history. And now, let's say, for an example, you've taken out a loan and have not serviced it. Yes, there is a time frame for each loan. I know you might know of the prescription of date prescribing. That's if you have not paid those dates within a number of 3 years or a maximum of 3 years, unpaid and unacknowledged, then it becomes prescribed. 5 years down the line, you're no longer in a position to, if you have not paid it, that means that the debt becomes prescribed. You're no longer able to, liable to pay it back. However, you may find that depending on what type of account or loan it is, it's very important that you find ways to service that loan, because it does impact you in the long run. You'll not be able to obtain a home loan or a vehicle finance if you still have a bad rating or maybe defaults under your name, you need to make sure that you actually get to, service the debt, properly, so that you can, be able to live a better life.
So what options do students who are struggling to pay their debts have?
There are quite a number of remedial actions that people that are struggling with debts, not just students, but everyone in general who's struggling with debts. There is debt mediation, and of course, as a debt counselor, we always advocate for debt counseling because it has shown to be more effective than, other remedial actions. As you get to, keep your assets, maintain a certain lifestyle, but still being able to pay your debt obligations as well. So there are quite a few of them. It's just a matter of looking at the options that are available and to say that which one would be right for my situation, because now we might both be in a financial predicament, but our options, what works for you might not work for me. One would say that, look, debt mediation might not work for me, however, I can apply for debt counseling. That might work better. So it really depends on your individual situation, and then once you tackle that, the best option will obviously, it will depend on your current state, but there are quite a number of them that people can apply for.
Paulvia, do you believe that there's possibly a policy change or initiative that could be put in place in order to address this issue of student debt? Because year on year, like you said, you mentioned that big number where we're now sitting with billions of rands, where students who haven't even started their lives are now sitting with such a big debt. Is there a policy change that could be implemented in reversing and changing the situation?
I believe that the funding, student funding policies, they should be based on financial realities. You need to be look at the numbers, because as we know that numbers don't lie. We need to get to a point where we see what can be done better, because now, for an example, granting student loans, how are there other options? Is it better to do student funding, a loan, personal loan, student loan, or is it better to do some sort of grant? Whichever one, then I believe that commercial banks also need to get to a point where they say that this is how much, or there should also be a max to say that, we can only assist up until this much. And of course, it makes it a bit difficult for students who really do not have some form of funding, either from or unable to obtain such from their families. But we need to get to a point where we look at financially, how is the country doing? Are we in a position to actually fund 100%, schooling, or is it possible that we can find ways and alter, and to say that, is it possible right now to grant those student loans right now, looking at the financial situation and dealing, I think, with it, not just dealing with it like generally, but have like realistic situations or solutions that would best fit each and every individual.
Right. Paulvia, thank you so much for joining us. Surely some students out there who are struggling with debt might have taken some of those nuggets of advice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much
for your insights. That was PS Debt Management CEO and Student Debt Advisor, Paulvia Shiburi.